What is this great conversation you're about to hear? Hello, everyone. This is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page. I'm an online event planner that supports artists' work from all over the world. They create the product. I help organize and execute a memorable event on social media for their fans, family members, and friends. What do Kevin Rowland, Babylon Zoo, and Slade all have in common? They come from the great place of Wolverhampton, England. Let's not forget about the post-punk alternative band, the Mighty Lemon Drops. Remember their smash 1988 hit tune, Inside Out? Well, they are that type of band that so many people admire for their brightly lit melodies and intense jingle-jangle guitar pop. My best friend Dave Von Gehr and I dip our feet into their infectious pool of songs that connect directly to the big, essential question. Why does the Mighty Lemon Drops music sound so crystal clear? Grab yourself a drink, have a seat, sit back, and enjoy our discussion on this magnificent band that deserve far more critical acclaim and public awareness. Hopefully, at the end of our talk, you'll be inspired to listen to more of their music and feel its resonant aural shine.
Yeah. What is that sound? Must be the Mighty Lemon Drops. Hello, everyone. This is W, host of the High Art on the Edge page. That is right. October 7th, Saturday, beautiful day here in the Bay Area. Let's get started in this very special surprise event, number 13. This surprise event will shine a light on a band that my best friend Dave here and I have really appreciated their sound for many, many years. And what we're going to do is we're going to take a deeper dive into their work and kind of explore this big essential question that I will share with you in a little bit. So let me bring in my best friend Dave, who I've actually known since kindergarten. We've grown up with many concert experiences, music experiences, friendship stuff. But as I mentioned earlier, the band that both he and I completely agree upon in terms of their sound and influence. So, Dave Von Gehr, how are you?
Great, William. How are you?
I'm doing quite well. Thank you for being here and participating in. Hopefully, you'll do some more later in the future. Maybe if we do some Midnight Oil or Depeche Mode.
Hey, I'm up for anything. It's just if you're such a big star now, it's just a question if you're going to have me on or not. But always happy to talk some Lemon Drops, because I think you and I agree, not only influential, great band, but one of the all-time underrated bands.
That's a great.
I really strongly feel.
I would agree with that, and let's not go all the way back to kindergarten with our friendship, but I want to ask you this question: where did it all begin for you in terms of you kind of getting infected by their sound?
Well, as you know, we both grew up loving the same music, whatever you want to call it, alternative, modern rock. And I think by the mid 80s, I was kind of squarely in the Depeche Mode, Cure bandwagon. Those were my two favorite bands. And great Bay Area radio station, Live 105, that we both cherish. And I just remember them talking about some new song they had. And I was not aware of the Happy Head era at that point, but they played a song called Inside Out. And I'm just like, wow, that's just like the most perfectly catchy song. Definitely, I'd still identify it as alternative or modern rock, but just so clean, so catchy, just great flow to it. And I was hooked at that point. I'm like, what? Let me find World Without End, and then they have something earlier. Yeah, let me devour that, and then it just grew from there.
So you mentioned catchy. What else resonates with you in terms of their sound?
To me, Mighty Lemon Drops just have this very clean sound, and what I mean by that is I feel like it's never showy. I never feel like any one member of the band is sort of overshadowing the other members or dominating the other members. Like if you have a rock and roll band with a really flashy lead guitarist or something like that. I just feel like the band, even though they changed band members at some point and they changed bassists in sort of the middle of their run, just always had this sort of tight, cohesive sound, which is like it's all about the overall sound of the music and the tightness of the band. It's not about one person. It's about this cohesive unit. We're just going to put out these great little 3 and 4 minute post-punk songs, whatever era, whatever label you want to put on it, and we're just going to do it. We're just going to do it our way, and it's and there's just a consistency to them that I really admire. They experiment a little bit with other sounds, especially later on when they got a little bigger, a little more produced. But for the most part, it is, you can tell every song it is drum and bass and Dave Newton's guitar and some catchy vocals by Paul Marsh, and that's about all there is to it. And to me, that's all you need. You don't need more than that.
Did you ever get to experience a Lemon Drops concert?
You know, I feel like hundreds of concerts you and I went together. And I know you've seen them a ton of times. I never saw them. And I don't know, maybe you were inviting your cool friends to those concerts and kicked me to the curb. I don't know, but never saw them, which I regret because they broke. It's one of those bands, classic, took them for granted, thought they'd be around for a while, catch them at some point, and then boom, they just broke up with apparently no hope of getting back together. One of those Smiths types arrangements, you know? And I was just like, oh man, I feel very fortunate to have seen just about every band that I've loved live, often multiple times. And that's one I look back on. I'm like, oh man, I had opportunities and didn't do it, took it for granted, said, oh, I'll catch them later on. And then boom, they were gone. And so I do regret I never saw them live.
We will get back to our conversation with that more particular focus here in a little bit. But I want you to tell the audience a little bit about your experience with music. Like, I know you had mentioned Live 105 and you and I sharing that interest there, but who kind of inspired you to get into music?
That's a good question. I think music for me was a coping mechanism for for getting an outlet for me, if you will, for getting through a tough time. As you know, my parents got divorced when I was 6 or 7. They both loved music, but very different. My dad was into classical and opera. My mom was into Neil Diamond and Barry Manilow and 70s easy listening stuff that I do not care for, show tunes. But music was always a constant. I may not have loved it, but music was a constant, something that was expected to be on during dinner or the backdrop of family conversations in cars or at home. And so I just think I got used to having the radio on, and then I discovered, Casey Kasem, Top 40, and then when that became, in the early 80s, and then when that became a little bland or boring, I'm like, oh, okay, what's this alternative stuff? What's this new wave stuff coming out primarily of Britain, or bands like the Cars or Blondie or Talking Heads from the US? And I was like, okay, I think I relate to this a little bit. It's still fundamentally pretty poppy and catchy, but it's just a little different. It's a little more experimental. It's a little more out there. And I really gravitated towards that. And it just became constant that music's just always on, whether it's even today when I'm doing work, it's always on. It's when I'm working out. It's just always been a constant, and just always loved it. And you just can't beat the energy of a live show and seeing a band you love, especially if they're in peak form, and just sort of that rush or that high that it gives you, as you and I have experienced many times in our concert going days.
So besides the Mighty Lemon Drops, who are some other bands that have an impact on your life?
So many. The first two I mentioned, I feel so lucky here in 2023 that I saw The Cure in June. I'm going to see Depeche Mode. They're coming to Seattle. Beautiful day in Seattle, by the way. You don't get to say that often in October. It's going to be like 75 degrees today. Going to see Depeche Mode in November those were the big two for me that were sort of the big bridge, I guess, over to the alternative world or modern rock or new wave, whatever you want to call it. So those are the two where just loved them from for the most part, with a few hiccups there here and there from start to finish. Know all the albums. So excited to see them live. Seen them multiple times live, and then a little bit on the dancier or popular side. Always loved Erasure, New Order. A couple bands that you helped me get into a little bit down the road were bands like Echo and the Bunnymen, for example. I mean, I knew their big songs, but I'd never taken really a deep dive into. You're like, "Oof, how do you not own Ocean Rain?" Or how do you not know The Cutter? Sure, everybody knows Lips Like Sugar, but take a deeper dive. When you get a text from William or an email say, "Hey, DVG, you like these bands? Check out these bands. Check out the Chameleons. Check out." I'm trying to think. More recent, Lord Huron, you recommended it. I'm like, "Dude, I mean, phenomenal." So some of those bands are a little more under the surface. Took me a little longer to get into, but so yeah, I'd say start with Cure and Depeche Mode, and then sort of evolved over time to more modern bands like the Killers, or a band that definitely inspired. I mean, they're named after a New Order video. They're deeply influenced by that music that we loved growing up, and bands like that, or Lord Huron, or a Band of Horses. I just constantly evolve and love them as well.
All right. Thank you for sharing those examples with us. So what we're going to do now is we're going to focus on this big essential question: what makes the mighty Lemon Drop sound so crystal clear? And we're going to share, starting with Happy Head, songs that really illustrate that from our opinions. And we're going to start with you, Dave, as you being our special guest here. So let's go to Happy Head, released in 1986. I'm going to give you some context. What was released? What other albums came out that year? Of course, I have to start with License to Ill. Billy Bragg's Talking with the Taxman About Poetry. And then Depeche Mode's Black Celebration. So and of course, many more. So it's some big heavy hitters that year. And then we get Happy Head, My Lemon Drops, produced by Stephen Street, a well-known producer who's worked with a ton of bands. All right, so let's start with you. What are the 2 or 3 tracks from that album that really connect to that big essential question?
One that upon re-listening really stood out to me was My Biggest Thrill. It's not one when I looked at the tracks before I started listening to it, it wasn't one that immediately jumped out to as one of my favorites or one that really stood out to me. But I listened to that and I'm just like, wow, sort of quintessential jangly guitar at the beginning, and then the way that works so well with the rhythm section, the bass and drum of that song. I was just like, wow, that one really stood out to me. I'm just like, that is, we talk about sort of their clean or clear sound. That one, and just vocally to sound a little more confident to me as well, especially when you get to the chorus of that one. So yeah, that was one I was surprised looking back at. I'm like, I'm gonna make a note of that one. That one really stood out to me upon re-listening.
Any others?
The other one that really stood out to me, at least in terms of a particular instrument shining a bit. I know I just talked about how they're such a cohesive unit, but listening to Like an Angel, which I know was their first single, I believe. Just the drums in that song, I just heard that I was just instantly fired up when that big drum sort of intro comes on. And I was like, okay, this is this band announcing themselves to the world, like, hey, we have this particular sound, and on this song, we're going to have this really strong lead in to get your attention, and then leading to very, very catchy song, I thought.
Those are great, sterling examples of those crystal clear moments. Let's take a listen to Like an Angel for a bit here. Yeah, punchy.
Drums just grab your attention and don't let go. And that bass, that rhythm section, so good.
So for me in the Happy Head, that's such a dynamite intro to their work. The flow from start to finish, it kind of has this vice grip on you and doesn't let go and just kind of beats you around and really in that kind of punky spirit. I would say my 2 to 3 tracks that really illustrate the crystal clear moment. The first one is Pass You By, that phenomenal chorus that comes in. And I think there's something underrated about their bridges, their middle eights. And within that song, the bridge has a completely different tone from the rest of the song, which is what bridges do. But this one is so radically out there. So I really appreciate that. And then Behind Your Back, that percussion work is extraordinary. And I feel as though as I, did my homework and really, really went back to connect to their music, we have to give props to the production work on every instrument. And you alluded to this earlier, that it doesn't or didn't seem that one person was kind of outclassing or outshining anybody else. So within that mixing sound and the mastering of their work, it seemed like all of the units, all the players on the field were participating in a way that allowed each of their skills to shine through. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense, and it's a great comment, because as much as I love this band, one of my complaints later on with some of their other albums when they maybe get a little overproduced is, boy, sometimes I'm like, where's the bass? It is just Happy Head and World Without End in particular. There's some really great bass parts, and then beyond that, especially on an album like Sound, I'm just like, wow, it's just like the bass is almost it's almost erased. It's almost muted, and you just don't have that strong rhythm section. So I think your comment is spot on.
The and Behind Your Back, as I mentioned, that work by Keith. There is when Paul Mars sings "Jump the Rails," and that the intensity of that chorus just builds and builds and builds. And I don't remember or recall seeing them perform that live, but I can go back in my head and go, okay, if they had performed that live, I can just imagine people just kind of jumping off the rails there and really having a good time.
Yeah, a Happy Head, when I listen to that album, it takes me to industrial London. They're from Wolverhampton, right? And you can just see some tiny club where they're just up there banging out these Happy Head songs, and people are just jumping around and losing their minds for an hour and a half, just getting sweaty and just so happy, and it's because it's just infectious. All those songs, there's not a dud on there.
No, and just a quick side note story. So as you know, I incorporated quite a bit of music into my classroom, and I thought it was time, like maybe 8-9 years ago. I was like, all right, it's time for my students to get to know the Mighty Lemon Drops. And so I used to play Other Side of You, and we'd sing it down at Robert's, at the local market. And it took them a while to get into that post-punk spirit, right? But I remember there was one event that we had. It was 7:30 in the morning, and we were singing it inside the store. And one of my students just lost his mind. And he started air guitaring and just jumping around. I'm like, yes, go with it. So it caught the spirit of my little fifth graders.
Yeah, where all the shoppers are Roberts, like, what is this crap? Sing
uh,
something by the Beatles.
no way. All right, let's go to our next album. You want to take this one away?
World Without End. Yeah, I listened to this album, and it's interesting because as my first intro into the Mighty Lemon Drops, I'm like, wow. I mean, Laughter is my unequivocal favorite, but I'm like, oh, before I re-listened to it, I'm like, wow, I really love World Without End too. And I listened to it, I'm like, maybe not so much. You know, I know you texted me a ranking of your Lemon Drops albums, and you had it fourth. And at first, I was like, that's way too low. But then I listened to it again. I'm like, I think William's onto something here. And I know we're going to talk about 2 or 3 songs, and I'm saying to myself as I listen to it, I'm like, don't just talk about the hits, you know. But I listened to it, I'm like, wow, the songs I really want to talk about are the quote unquote popular songs, at least ones I heard on alternative radio or maybe saw a video on 120 minutes or something back in the day. So yeah, maybe there's some deep tracks you want to talk about, but to me it was Inside Out in particular. And I know I'm biased. That was really my first intro hearing that. And from the first time I heard it, I loved it. And listening to it again, I'm just like, it's just a timelessness about that song. Um, the intro guitar is just absolutely infectious. It grabs you right away. Drums kick on, and you know, it's the first song on this album. And it's just like, I hear that and it's like, wow, okay, after Happy Head, I think they got a surge of confidence. And to me, Paul Marsh just sounds like, hey, we're a legitimate rock band now. I am a good singer, and I'm gonna kill this intro song. And again, you talk about the bridges on it. Little, I felt like they expand a little tiny bit of distortion on there. And yeah, boy, the bridge. I mean, the chorus is completely irresistible. So yeah, Inside Out, you can't go wrong. Inside Out is a song, you know, I have all these, you know, Apple playlists I'll play at dinner. That song comes on. It's a rare song where like my wife and daughter who know practically nothing about Lemon Drops be like, oh, what's this song? This is a great song. Just sort of that universal appeal. So there's that. Love in Everything You Do. I've always loved that song. I really thought Paul Marsh really shines on their slower songs. I think he's a good singer regardless, but when you really strip down the sound, I almost feel like he steps up his game a little bit. And just the flow of In Everything You Do. And man, I just love the intro and the outro with that just very simple, beautiful guitar, and the drumming in particular as it fades out is just incredible work, I think. And then to me, upon re-listening to that album, the standout, which is a song I've always liked but never thought it was in the Inside Out category, but Fall Down Like the Rain. Just listening to that, I'm like, wow, this is a more complicated lyrical structure for them. The chorus in particular has sort of these great 3-part rhymes that really stood out to me. I'm like, okay, I felt like they took a step lyrically with the song while also just a completely catchy intro guitar riff. And the way that song ends, how listening to that and then listening to Laughter didn't take this band to the next level of popularity is just blows me away, because this is without a doubt one of my top 10 favorite albums of all time. And in doing a little homework for this, I had read about how after their first 2 albums, they felt like, and I think someone interviewed Dave Newton about this, but they felt like they were sort of lumped in with all these quote unquote gloom and doom British bands, and they really wanted to lighten up their sound a little bit. And so they went for a more obviously lighter, poppier touch on when they were recording Laughter. And I'm all for it. I mean, to me, this album is from start to finish, this is one of the all-time great, catchiest album. And yeah, I'm looking at my notes here. I have like 7 of the songs written down. But I have to start with the one that grabs me every time when I play this album. and I hear the opening notes of At Midnight, every single time I am immediately entranced. Just the kind of loud opening guitar sound right into that powerhouse drums, and then back to a more sort of catchy, jangly guitar. And again, that just leads right to these lyrics and the soaring chorus of that song. Irresistible. I mean, it's one of the all-time great album openers, and one I love playing for people who have never heard of the Mighty Lemon Drops, or maybe it's, alternative music isn't their thing, and every time they're like, "What's this? Who's this? This is incredible." Like, you like rock music, you like pop music, you like that song, and so yeah, every single time I hear that. All right, I'm going to keep it to 3, as hard as it is. One in a Million, the incredible successor to In Everything You Do.
Yes.
Again, just Paul Marsh on these slower songs, just shines. And again, the way that song builds from kind of a slower acoustic guitar to powerhouse electric guitar, and it kind of and just builds and builds and builds and builds into this faster song towards the end, but still just beautiful, haunting in the vocals, and just amazing. And then, as you know, I think I've commented to you before that Laughter, not including Rumble Train, which I think is only on the CD, but you throw out Rumble Train, Laughter has the best closing tracks of like any album I can think of. And as much as I love Beautiful Shame, I had to talk about, again, upon re-listening, what is the one that really jumped out at me? Second Time Around. That guitar riff at the start of that song, I mean, talk about one, I listened to it, I had to go back and listen to it again, at least the opening part. And as you well know, my lovely wife, Tracy, I've been married to her for 18 years. When we first started dating, 2001, one thing I love about her, she's very into music, but she's very into pop music. Janet Jackson, Madonna, that is her jam. And I love that stuff too, but I'm like, all right, can I play a few albums for you? And some of them are very hit or miss. And I remember we listened to Laughter one time when we were in New York City traveling together, and Second Time Around came on. She's just like, what? This is fantastic. Like, how do I not know about this? I was thinking to myself, like, how does the world not know about this? How do people not know about Laughter? And I mean, she loved the whole thing, and she thinks it's a great album, just like I do. And I've even got my daughter into it. And but boy, on the re-listening, Second Time Around, that intro guitar and that chorus and the music right after the chorus and the way I love everything about it. But that was the one I love the whole album. I'm like, okay, that one really stood out to me on re-listening. So now you have the difficult task of picking 2 or 3 songs off this masterpiece.
Yeah, no, this was hard. This was really hard.
Very hard.
This album has been traveling with me for a long, long time. This was the moment that I saw them live at the Warfield with the Ocean Blue and John Wesley Harding. I will never forget it.
Where was my invite?
You were listening to Janet Jackson.
I probably was. Rhythm Nation. Hard to deny.
It would be easy for me to say they opened up with At Midnight, and I believe they did. Someone can fact check me on that, I'm sure. But that is one of the tracks. Like you said, the intro is perfect. The entire song makes a loud statement. The production work the quality on that is fantastic. And it just puts you into that immersive aural experience with them that you're going to be going on a ride for this 10 tracks, if you will. So yeah, definitely At Midnight. But I also want to give you some context too. I forgot to tell you. That year was phenomenally impressive when it came to albums. 9 Inch Nails, Pretty Hate Machine, Peter Murphy, Deep, and then of course New Order, Technique.
Talking 89 here?
Yeah.
89, yeah.
So this album sits in beautifully with the rest of those opuses, if you will. All right. This second track for me kind of bounced back and forth. It was a song that I loved and loved and loved. And then for some reason, I found other tracks that I loved just as much. And then I came back to this one, and it's All That I Can Do.
Love that song.
Oh,
so close to choosing that one, but second time around got me, but yeah.
You get inside the skin of that chorus and the horns, if you will.
That drums with the
drums.
Love it.
All the elements of their depth skill work really shines through on that song. And I love the tempo. Absolutely love the tempo. All right. Now, if you were to ask me what is my all-time favorite Mighty Lemon Drops song, it's actually on this album. And it is a song that I can tell you when I used to cut school and go off into the city and had the tape playing, CD, I would repeat, and I still do it to this day. And that is Beautiful Shame. That is my number one MLD song. It's my number one song on the album. And, some songs, when the lead vocalist gets repetitive and it kind of grates, never on this track. It is like what I call the PPP, the pure pop perfection. And what we're going to do is we're going to listen to it just for a little bit here. That bass work.
I wish I had the nerve to tell you what I heard. I heard a rumor, but I didn't say it.
This is crystal clear.
Based on what you told. It makes my body hot, it makes my blood run.
And then
yeah, I mean, this album is such an embarrassment of riches. It's like, how can I not choose Beautiful Shame? I had a sneaking feeling you were going to talk about it, though. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a chance here, but I think you're going to talk about it. Of course, I have to tell a quick William story here. William came to visit me at college, and I was able to get him a DJing gig. And of course, he dropped all my CDs and broke them later, but that's a different story. But William was good, and for the most part played, it was kind of an 80s themed dance, and played pretty mainstream stuff and built out a good dance floor. People were fired up. And at the time I was dating this girl, and I had gotten her into the Mighty Lemon Drops and Laughter, in particular Beautiful Shame. And I remember middle of this packed dance floor playing all these 80s songs that people knew and loved. He throws on Beautiful Shame. No one knew the song other than me and my girlfriend, and we loved it. We had a moment, but not one person left the dance floor. I think more people may have come out. It fit in so beautifully with all the other songs he was playing that everybody knew, and everyone I could tell was kind of looking around like, I don't know what this is, but it's phenomenal, and I'm staying on the dance floor. And I think some more people may have joined. And I just remember that moment so clearly, just like, man, how is this song not bigger? How is this band not bigger? So good. So good.
And I remember, thank you for taking me on that stroll to memory lane there. And then wasn't that like a couple songs later, I threw on Meat Beat Manifesto, and everyone just cleared.
Yeah, exactly. You got a little greedy there.
But yeah, so that laughter experience, when I look in the rearview mirror, when it comes to seminal moments in my musical life, yeah, this album stands. It's always there, right there. Okay, so now let's go to 1991, and I'll give you a little bit of context here. That was when this little band called Nirvana broke through with Nevermind. The Pixies, one of my favorite albums by them, Trompe le Monde. So those were the kind of two big albums that year. Jane's Addiction, I believe Ritual de la Habitual came out. And then we get Sound, which a radical departure. And that's kind of the title of the album. So I want to hear your 2 to 3 picks here from this album.
Yeah, I had a hard time coming up with 2 or 3 songs. I find this album very disappointing. I know it's called Sound, Say Goodbye to Your Standards, and I felt like they sort of said goodbye to their songwriting standards on this one, or got a little too cute. I feel like this is the quintessential album that so many artists come out with, where they're like, we have a couple good songs, but we can't quite get over the hump and have a bunch of great songs. And especially coming off Laughter, it's so disappointing to me, because I feel like if Laughter's that good, man, they must have had some other songs that didn't make Laughter that maybe could have been on Sound. But I feel like Sound, they said, no, we're starting from scratch. We're doing something new. We're working a new producer, new sound, new everything, and it just falls flat to me. So I do have 3 songs, but this was the one I had the hardest time finding them. I really feel like the 2 standout tracks back to back. Too High almost feels to me like it could have been on Laughter. The way that song starts, it is a very infectious opening song. Feel like a little more aggressive tone to it. Little louder. I'm not going to say grungier. I know, we're talking about the birth of grunge here, but a little bit more of an aggressive opening riff. And to me, I know I talked about Fall Down Like the Rain before, and how I felt like that was a more challenging chorus, and I had the sort of the triple rhyme scheme there. But the chorus of Too High, I still to this day don't know what he says. It's so fast, but just that whole series of words sounds great together into the we're too high part, and then the guitar riff throughout the whole thing. So that is the absolute standout to me on this album. I do like the way it flows right into Unkind, which to me is the other real standout song from this album. And I knew that song well, but re-listening to it immediately, I'm like, wow, the drums on this song really caught my attention. And again, I'm just like, wow, really, really excellent work on the drums there. And then I'm like, okay. I think that's an album, a lot of times I listen to the first 2 songs and maybe kind of blitz through the rest of it because there wasn't a standout track. But definitely upon re-listening to it, the song You Don't Appreciate Anything really, really jumped out at me. I'm like, wow, this is an underrated little gem here towards the end. And in particular, the rhythm section I found, it's the bass and drums working together on that. And in particular, the bass work on that song. I kind of felt like the bass had sort of been lost on this album. And I'm like, oh, there it is. Okay, it's back. Maybe it doesn't stand out as much on some of their other tracks. But it's there, and it really works beautifully with the drums on that song. And I really think on that album, along with Too High, that's one of Paul Marsh's stronger moments as well. I think the vocals on that song to me are very, very powerful and stand out amongst the songs on that album.
Thank you for sharing. I think I'm always going to look back at this album very fondly, because it was a time in my life where I was really struggling in high school, and I was getting in kind of darker experience with music and finding new friendships outside of our high school experience. And I remember seeing them down in San Jose for, I believe, for this tour. And I remember these songs really popped more so than the album. So I do have an attachment, not as strong as the other albums. But I think, in echoing your sentiments, the first track with Too High, it's a great way to launch into an album, which they do so well, right? It's you get the chimes, you get the bells, you get that quintessential Mighty Lemon Drop sound. The production level on this album, it definitely has that kind of 60s power pop. So you do have to go over to your equalizer, and put up that bass a little bit more. But I do appreciate that they kind of stepped aside a little bit and tried something. I think that's important in the learning curve in that experience. And, you're going to have some hits and misses. The other track that I absolutely adore was Colorful Loving Me. And that's a song that I didn't fully appreciate until a couple of years ago. And Paul Marsh's vocals, again, really ring through. And I just love the instrumentation. I love particularly the drum work on that. And I love the back end, the outro to it. And then we're going to talk about Always, track number 5, kind of just this. It's, people say, they always talk about first great tracks or closing tracks, or what's a great number 2 track. I think this is a great middle album track. Kind of has elements of all of their work a little bit. So, again, I know it may not be everyone's favorite Mighty Lemon Drops album, but again, go over to that equalizer, push up the bass a little bit more, and you can start really appreciating their willingness to try something different. And that's kind of how I feel about those songs. With their Too High example, and then you get this kind of this. We've arrived again. And the vocal work, I'm glad you mentioned that. Just the trickery of that, kind of almost rapish, if you will. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a nice little challenge for him to do that. All right, we're going to wrap this up with Ricochet, 1992. Let me give you some albums here. Some people say this is like one of the greatest years for album releases. All right, we have Dr. Dre, Chronic, Ride, Going Blank Again, The Cure, Wish, Beastie Boys, my favorite album, Check Your Head. Then we get Ricochet. Let's hear your thoughts.
Well, this is an album that I knew somewhat, but after the disappointment of sound, I wasn't super eager to listen to Ricochet, at least in the 90s, but I did a few times. But I'll never forget. See, when you get a text from William that says, you need to go back and listen to this album, it's really good. You pay attention, because that is a solid gold recommendation right there. So I can distinctly remember getting a text from you maybe 2 years ago. You're like, what's a great album? Ricochet. And I was like, oh man, I haven't heard that in a while. Popped it on. I'm like, yeah, there's some good stuff on there. I felt like they learned their lessons from sound, and they still had some of that inspiration from sound, kind of the differences, taking some chances, but reined it in a little bit and really kind of got back to their roots of just super catchy songwriting. So other than Laughter, this is the one I had the hardest time trying to pin down some songs, because again, listening to it a couple times this week, I'm like, whew, This is good stuff through and through. You can really talk about just about any track on this album. But again, I'll start. I feel like Lemon Drops remind me a little bit of Depeche Mode, and that just about every album they just grab you right away with the first song. Like Depeche Mode, I think is, even though a lot of their albums are inconsistent, especially in their later years, boom, right from the get, that first song, you know, Never Let Me Down Again, or World in My Eyes. They're gonna catch you, and then you can decide if you want to stay or not. But Nothing right off the bat,
Yeah.
so good. I heard that, I'm like, oh yeah, this is good. And what immediately caught me about Ricochet, and especially right from the get go with that first song, is wow. Not only does Paul Marsh sound refreshed and maybe a little more comfortable with the material, but man, the backing vocals and yeah, it was just really, really impressed with that. Speaking of backing vocals, the track, I feel like every one of these albums I listened to, I was really trying to listen to maybe a song I didn't know as well that really popped for me or really stood out. And for me on this album, that was Falling Deep.
Yes.
And what I loved about that, I'm like, okay. I felt like over album to album, sort of their backing vocals have gotten better. And I don't know who it is, maybe you know this, but the female backing vocals on that track are phenomenal.
So that would be Susie Hugg from the Katydids, and I think they were friends or they had toured together or something like that. But yeah, beautiful vocals there.
Yeah, and I'm just like, wow, they should have done this more often. That is a really great pairing of voices and harmonies that just really stood out to me. I'm like, wow, that is a real standout song for me. And then the last one I'm going to go with is Hallowed Ground.
Oh, yeah.
Getting strong towards the end of that. But again, in some of those middle albums, on sound and even as much as I love Laughter, I really feel like, yeah, maybe you do need to trim the bass a little bit. The bass isn't as prominent. And then I listen to Hallowed Ground. I'm like, okay, there's the old Lemon Drops bass, like boom, kind of right from the beginning, just sort of grabs you and just leads into a really great track, I think. So, I mean, I'm looking at my notes here. I have like 8 songs written down. We're off the bat. I'm like, those are the 3 I want to talk about. But you could go so many directions with this album. It really felt like a nice return to form for them, at least in my opinion.
It's almost something you hear on Happy Head.
Mm-hmm, exactly, yeah.
Here it comes.
Welcome return.
Had a very Doors-ish. Nick Cave. If that's going to be your last song on your last album, that is a hell of a way to go. And that outro is fantastic.
Really grabbed me, yeah.
I'm glad you picked that one. Thank you. So this album for me, it is kind of like, if you go, I think we've talked about this with Erasure. Like, it's kind of like the chorus album. I just think it's underappreciated, but when people listen to it, they can go, oh yeah, got it. And it kind of got lost in the shuffle of all those albums that I mentioned. But I think for me, this album speaks a couple things. One, I mean, the title, Ricochet, right? Coming back, rebound. I think that's a perfect title. I think they kind of caught all their previous work in that big net of theirs, all that experience. I thought the production work on this album is fantastic. You can really hear every bits and pieces of the instruments being played, and Paul Marsh's vocals again really punch through. So for me, you got to start with Nothing. I mean, again, it's one of those songs I will hit repeat. I love that song so much. And, we haven't even talked about the romantic quality of his voice and what that does emotionally for me. It's it really fills me up with a lot of joy. And and I feel like that song really illustrates that. The next song for me would be Sense. It's track number 3.
On my notes here, I was close to picking that one. Lovely.
It is so lovely. Kind of get the echoey reverb vocal here. And that's almost like a cousin, a little bit to maybe In Everything You Do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and then the la parts towards the end, all good. And then my favorite track on this album is actually From the Sky. I think that's some of Paul's best vocal work from start to finish. That song just muscles up. So melodic, so beautiful. So those are my 3 tracks: Nothing, Sense, From the Sky. And it's a hell of an album. Hopefully people who are listening to this go back and check out Ricochet. And I want to close it out with this. If you can find it. So this is the album. And then they released 10 extra tracks, some live tracks here. And then they have some tracks on here, bonus tracks that I never made it on the original release, and that was Ricochet and Guiding Light. You have to check these out. It's one of those, how the hell were these songs not put on here? Amazing stuff. But then they have some live stuff, Into the Heart of Love, Nothing, Happy Head, Closer to You, and then they close it out with Inside Out. So if you can find this is a really good pickup.
Yeah, one thing, when I was listening to Ricochet just this week, and I don't know if you had the same feeling, but I'm like, man, this is the right album at the wrong time. Everyone's listening to Nevermind and 10 and I don't know, Blood Sugar Sex Magic right now. And this album comes out in 1992 that had it been released in, say, like 1988, I think could have been just big for them. I mean, I'm just like, man, this is so good, but maybe just the right album at the wrong time.
Well, and let's give them credit too for putting out so much music within a span of 5 years, 6 years, right?
Yeah.
And it's pretty amazing what they accomplished, and just one of those bands that very influential, very inspiring, but just always sat on this, just underneath the surface of popularity when it comes to alternative post-punk music.
Well, I think it's so interesting because in doing some research for this week and just reading a ton of stuff, it's just like all these comparisons to Echo and the Bunnymen. I mean, in particular, many bands, but Mighty Lemon Drops, they're trying to sound like Will Sargent and Ian McCulloch, and I listen to them, I'm just like, I don't know, I sort of get the general impression that the press or the music world sort of thought they were this lesser version of Echo and the Bunnymen or some of these other bands, and I'm just like, I don't get it. I mean, to me, Echo and the Bunnymen, which is a band I love as well, but to me, that is, it's Ian's vocals and it's Will Sargent's very distinctive guitar sort of dominating every song. And I think that's a formula that works very well. But I don't know about you, but when re-listening to these albums, there weren't a lot of times where I'm listening to them thinking like, oh, that sounds like Echo and the Bunnymen.
Right.
I mean, maybe a few times here and there, but I think you could say they sounded like a lot of other bands too. I never quite got that comparison, and how maybe Echo the Bunnymen, again, not a huge band, but maybe broke through a little bit more than the Mighty Lemon Drops. But it was, thank you for inviting me to do this. It was great to go back and listen to all these albums again and find the nuggets and really try to pinpoint some songs that really distinguish them. So thank you for having me. It was a blast.
You're absolutely welcome. And I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Yeah.
I want to know, what is
William's specialty?
What is your all-time favorite Mighty Lemon Drops tune?
Ooh. Ambush. All-time favorite. Are you trying to kill me right now? I think it's in Everything You Do. I'm just gonna go with my gut instinct there. There's like 7 songs off Laughter, I want to say. Boy, at midnight. I think I'll stick with In Everything You Do. That song is just so pretty and melodic. I can a quick story, and then we can wrap up. But again, in when I first met my wife and I introduced her to some music, which was very hit or miss. I love that she loved Laughter, and I'm like, well, if you love that album, let me just play you a few other their songs. And I remember playing In Everything You Do, and she liked it so much. I mean, we seriously considered that being like our wedding song.
Oh, wow.
And we didn't go that direction, but
thank you, because I would have jumped in and ruined the whole moment.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, you didn't have a few drinks at my wedding or anything. But I was just thinking, like, I'm sure somebody's used that as their wedding song, or their first dance or something like that. And how great would that be? Just the song you're filling up a ballroom or wherever you are, a hotel, a conference or wherever you are. And that song just coming on, just filling up the room and just sort of building to that beautiful chorus that a lot of people don't really know. And that's just always stuck with me. It's a song that if people have never heard it instantly are just like, wow, this song is beautiful. And it's just, you and I talked about that for us, like the Lemon Drops, it's a lot about their sound and not so much their lyrics. That's one where I think the lyrics just not only flow beautifully within the song, but have a really powerful message about like, hey, I'm going to be there for you. I'm going to support you through thick and thin. That really gave us, some strong consideration. For the record, we went with a Sade song, "No Ordinary Love," which was really kind of perfect for our situation and for where we got married. Kind of the vibe of the place that worked well. I can't deny that, but it was on the short list.
Nice. That's a huge compliment to the entire band. Dave Von Gehr, I hope we can do this again for another tribute to another band that you and I have always appreciated over the years.
Anytime, brother. I had a blast. It was great seeing you. I love that you do all this, and I'd love to join you anytime.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to another surprise event. Again, my name is W, aka William, host of the High Art on the Edge page. Just to give you some more information about upcoming events, we'll be doing tribute for OMD as they have a brand new album coming out. We have the Walkman, the National, and a few more. So stay tuned for more details. Take care. Ciao. Well, that was just an amazing examination of the Mighty Lemon Drops music. I hope you enjoyed that special event. By the way, speaking of a Mighty Lemon Drop, we have a special surprise guest here. This is David Newton from the Mighty Lemon Drops. David, how are you?
That's me. It is indeed. I'm doing all right. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being a special guest on this event. What's new with you?
What's new? There's nothing that exciting and new, really. It's just business as usual. Living here in Burbank, California. This is my 28th and a bit coming up to 29th year. It will be in January as Los Angeles, but Burbank it was 28 years in July. So it's nothing super exciting today. Bit of work to do in a bit, and but yeah, just getting into the morning.
So if you wouldn't mind sharing with us, how did you end up in Los Angeles?
Because in 1987 I met a girl who would become my wife a couple of years later in 1989, who was originally from Los Angeles. And she just was going to school in London. We started dating. She moved to Wolverhampton with me in 1988. And then in 1990, we moved to London together and lived there through the latter days of the Mighty Lemon Drops. And the Lemon Drops ended at the end of 92, 93. Stayed in London for another couple of years and decided to move back to Los Angeles. Well, to Los Angeles for me in 1995. And been here ever since.
So for those that have never been to Wolverhampton, can you kind of describe that environment and how it might differ from Los Angeles?
You can't really compare Wolverhampton to Los Angeles at all. Wolverhampton, it's what, 250,000 people. It was a town when I was growing up. It was 10, 15 years ago. It's now a city of Wolverhampton. It's a predominantly working class town. It was a nice place to grow up. Really, I had a lot of good friends. My family wasn't, weren't super wealthy or anything, but it was a nice working class environment. I went to a good school, good friends, great place, good time to be into music and everything as growing up and all that. So, yeah, but it's like your typical blue collar, as you call it here, working class environment, really.
I owe a great deal of gratitude to my older brother, Todd, who really exposed me to quite a bit of music. I never became a musician. Right. I want to know from you, when did that itch to be a guitarist or some form of musicianship take hold in your life? Who inspired that?
I think it was after, because there was music around our house, really. Like my dad was Welsh, and he was into a lot of Welsh male voice choirs and stuff like that. And Tom Jones was big in our house, being from Wales as well. And I just started buying records when I was a kid. The first record I ever bought was in the end of 1973, with money I'd got given for Christmas. I bought a T-Rex single, Solid Gold Easy Action, Mark Bolan and T-Rex. And that was the gateway. And since then, I just started buying. I would buy a 45 every week when it was basically when the records would fall out of the top 40, top 50. They would go in the X chart box and they'd be half price. They'd be like 25p instead of like 45 or 50p. And I started, I can't remember how much pocket money I was getting, probably 50p. So 20 pence of that each week would be spent on. I'd buy on average one pop single a week. And it was a great time to be in the UK because it was a mixture of everything from my favourite stuff was like the kind of the glam glitter thing, like T-Rex, Slade, Sweet, Bowie, all that stuff. And there's a lot of other stuff too, like Northern Soul was big a few years later, which I was really into. And I kind of flirted a little with progressive rock. Like I think I actually, sad to admit that I even own Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd, which I wouldn't really admit to nowadays. And but then of course in 1976 it was I started hearing about punk rock, and I would have been about 12 years old, and that just changed my life because there'd been a guitar knocking around the house and I couldn't really emulate what David Bowie's, Mick Ronson was playing in David Bowie's band or whatever. But then when punk came around, I could almost kind of play some of those songs, and I think that's what inspired me to play guitar as well, was punk. I mean, I know it's a cliche for people to say that, but I mean, it really was, and punk was a lot different in the UK to what it was in the US. It was, it wasn't as accessible as it was in the UK, because a lot of the bands in the UK, like the Clash and the Pistols and Buzzcocks, all had major record deals, and their records would get in the charts, and they're even on top of the pops and stuff. So that was got me into it.
I believe the first time I saw the Mighty Lemon Drops was San Francisco, the Warfield. I believe John Wesley Harding was part of that billing.
And the Ocean Blue. Yep.
So I clearly remember that experience as being kind of a game changer for me. Can you share a story or two about a concert that kind of opened your eyes as a concert goer?
I mean, a lot did, really. It was, again, I'm not saying it's a cliche to say the punk thing, but it was seeing a lot of those bands. The first gig I ever went to, I was 12 years old, was a band called Bebop Deluxe, which was Bill Nelson, supported by the Steve Gibbons Band. Then the second gig after that was actually the Clash at the Victoria Park in London. It was the big, it's on, if you look on the internet, you can find lots about it. It was a big CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament festival in April 1978. And we had a teacher at school who was politically involved in a lot of things like CND, Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament, and all that, Rock Against Racism and stuff like that. And he basically was chaperoned 5 of us to London as part of a coach. We had to get a permission letter from our parents. I was 14 at the time. And that was an amazing eye-opener. And I saw the Clash twice that year. I saw them again in December with the Slits and the Innocents at Wolverhampton Civic Hall, which was where I grew up, Wolverhampton. So I'd say those 2 gigs really were like the real kind of, that was just had a big impact.
So
in many ways.
If you take me to those moments of that show with the Clash. I mean, we've seen tons of footage of him, but what was it really like to experience that visceral?
I mean, it was a world because we were 5, 13, 14-year-old kids walking around London on our own, and the teacher was like, he's like, you know what? You can do what you want, but you better be back here at 5 o'clock or you're in effing trouble. He spoke our language as well. So, I mean, I can't say that there was any particular. It was just like the whole day was just like this, like a whirlwind. I don't know these metaphors too much, but it really was, And we there's photographs of it now. And I actually took photos too. And when I look now, because they expected 5 or 10,000 people, and I think 50 or 60,000 turned up in the end. And we were near the front. We were like, I mean, you should see the photos that I have. I mean, they've been, of course, I put them on the internet like 20 years ago without watermarking them, and they've been nicked and used everywhere now. And they're mine. There's a lot of the photos. I've seen them in books with no credit, which is kind of funny, really.
Oh, wow.
I don't know. But yeah, so I mean, it was, when you're 13, 14, I can't really remember what my mind was. All I was interested in was music and girls and whatever a typical 14-year-old's interested in. So I wasn't really in touch with my inner psyche to have any,
Sure.
I can't really, I have no idea. So that's all I can
do
tell
Do you go to concerts in Los Angeles?
Do I? Yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't go out as much as I used to. Well, I moved here in '95, and I was still in going out 3-4 nights a week mode in those days. And I still do, though. I mean, up until about 10 years ago, I was still seeing about 1 or 2 shows a week. No, it's down to about 1 every couple of weeks. I don't really go to because I still work with, the closest thing I have to resembling a day job is I have a recording studio, which I initially built for myself when I moved here. And I still work with a lot of, all types of bands, really, but a lot of, most of them are younger than me, of course. Not all of them, but a lot of them are. So I'd say about half of the shows that I go to nowadays are things that I've been involved in. I kind of support, if it's a record that I've done with an artist or a band, I'll go and see that. Actually, the last show that I saw was about, actually there were 2 different bands playing with 2 different people that I'd worked with. It was Actually, the main band was an old LA punk band called the Weirdos, who the guitar player was also in a band called Down by Law that I'd worked with in my studio. And the opening band was a band called Black Adidas, who I recently, they're a newer band. And I've done 2 records with them now. So, I mean, that gives you an example of the kind of thing that I go to. I don't know what else is coming up on the agenda. I'm actually going to see that on Sunday. I'm going to see a little low-key showcasing of that band Warpaint. They're playing.
Oh, okay.
So I'm going to pop by that because it's a kind of an afternoon showcase thing, which is totally more my speed nowadays rather than staying out all night. I like to go to these things that are kind of daytime, afternoon kind of shows.
I think you have a big festival coming up with, I think OMD's playing, Echo and the Bunnymen.
Yeah, there's so many of those. I did go to one earlier this year. I went to the Cruel World Festival, which was it was good. Who did I see? I caught who did I see? When I got in there, I caught the end of Echo and the Bunnymen. I saw Love and Rockets, who Lemon Drops toured with, and they were great. Yeah. I mean, I like them. They're not my favourite band or anything, but I have a soft spot for them because we toured with them and got to know them. But they were the best band that day. You know, unfortunately, just before. Well, did Susie come on, or was Susie about to come on? I can't remember. But I think it was during Iggy. But what they did because it started raining, so they actually closed the festival off, and they actually reopened it the following day. And I saw Iggy, Susie, and that was actually the last gig that I kind of saw where I saw a lot of older bands, more established bands.
I heard Susie was fantastic, and
it was great. Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
So tell us a Mighty Lemon Drop story, or just a story that you want to share with the audience, whether it be on tour, recording an album, anything related to your life as a musician.
You give me some points. I mean, I don't know where to start.
Well, sure. Is there? I know you've done so much touring in your life, so was there a city that you had this phenomenal experience, or was there like a happy accident, or you're on stage and something goes wrong on with the amps and anything?
That happened at every other gig. No, I mean, there's just like lots of it, really. I mean, from like the first time we came to America was the most enlightening because I'd been to New York once, and to actually go around the United States, that was, and we were with the Chameleons, who were it was a band that I actually had been following for like 5 or 6 years before that. I'd bought their records, seen them live, been to shows and all that. And that was, that whole tour was a moment that would, that feeling of seeing all the different parts of America, seeing how big it was, the vastness, and traveling most of a day to get to a show and stuff. That was new, because you could tour the entire UK in a couple of weeks.
Was there a particular place that you found that there was kind of a stronger fan base? Like, for example, Paul Simpson of the Wild Swans, it just turns out, I mean, he's got a really strong following around the world, but the Philippines and Manila and Cebu, he's got a huge following there. So was there a particular place for you that you found like, wow, there is a strong, vehement love for the Mighty Lemon Drops that you weren't expecting in this area of the world?
No, not really. I mean, there's a lot of different ones. Obviously some places you have more of a following than others, but there's no particular place that stands out. It was, I mean, we went to Brazil, for instance. We went to Sao Paulo and Rio de Janeiro, and we didn't think that anybody would know our music there, and we were surprised that they did. You know, it was nice. I don't know how we ended up going there, but it was great. So not really. I mean, it's wherever we would play that. It's very rare that we go. So the only place that's a little odd that I've been there a few times with other bands as well is sometimes Switzerland can be a little odd. It's like they treat you really well there, and not being what's the word? They pay well, they treat you well, they give you an amazing rider and give you everything, but nobody comes to the shows. And like I've been there a couple of times with different bands as well, and each time there's been like 60 or 70 people there who like really love you and go crazy. But and everybody's like, yeah, that's normal. That's kind of the way, unless you're like a huge band, I'm sure. But
was there a particular venue that you really enjoyed playing at?
Lots of them, yeah. I don't know really offhand, nah, not really. No one particular one. No, they're all, played in lots of different places, and there's a few that we played more than once, but especially in the UK, like the Town and Country Club was always good. The Astoria Theatre was always good in London. We played the Palace in Los Angeles. It's now called, can't remember what it's called nowadays. Keeps changing its mind since different corporate companies keep buying it over the years. But we played the Palace several times. That was good. Having said that, playing at Universal Amphitheatre with Love and Rockets, which at the time it was, because that holds like 5,000 or 6,000 people. That was pretty something. Another big place we played was we did a tour of the UK with the Mission UK, and they were really they were huge in the UK in the mid-late 80s. Mm-hmm. And we played Wembley Arena in London with the Mission, which is like 10 or 12,000 people. But I don't really have, when you play places like that and you've been used to playing to like 700, 800, 1,000. 2,000 people tops maybe. When you play a bigger place like that, it's not the same. I don't think so. I mean, if you're one of these, if you're U2 or if you're Simple Minds or, it's like those bands, their music was made to be heard in works better in those kind of venues than, I remember reading an interview or hearing an interview with Jim Kerr from Simple Minds once, and him saying that when the Jam became one of the biggest bands in the UK in the late 1970s, early 80s, he saw them in a huge arena, and he didn't think that the sound they made was appropriate and filled that arena, had the same energy as what it did when they played in a small club. But he said when he formed Simple Minds, he wanted to make a band that would make a sound that would fill that. Which, I mean, I kind of laughed. Being younger, I think I laughed at that at the time. But I do totally understand that, and I do get that. And he did achieve that. So I'll give credit where credit's due. And he did that. Whereas, and I do kind of get that with the Jam, because, I mean, they were much, I'm sure that the sound that they made would be much better in a smaller place than a cavernous, echoing arena, So what would you? The Lemon Drops were better in smaller venues too. So yeah.
What would you tell up and coming musicians about touring? What would you recommend to them about, keeping up your stamina, how to stay healthy, or what do you recommend? What would you suggest?
You're asking the wrong person there, because I did none of that.
Did you enjoy?
I'm not really the person to ask, on that. I can't give healthy tips or what's the strategically best thing to do on being in the band, because I probably did all the wrong things. So,
did you enjoy touring overall? Did you?
I did really. I mean, you reach a point where you kind of, like in 1988 we spent most of that year touring. We did like the UK, Europe. We did actually 1990. We spent 4 months just in the US in 1990 on that tour. And but were we? Did we look after ourselves? Did we go to the gym? Did we drink. No, we did none of that. We were like in our 20s. So we were just, you just live for the day, and it's boring. So what do you do? 5 o'clock comes around, so you open a beer, and before you know it, it's like they go, oh, by the way, your stage time's 11:30. So come 11:30, you realise that you've drank like a bottle of wine, half a bottle of vodka, and 16 beers. And it's like then the following day comes around, and 5 o'clock comes around again, and you're bored. So you do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
So, but hey, that's when you're younger, you can do that kind of thing, I guess.
We're going to wrap this up. Speaking of David Newton,
well, we weren't exactly, So we never thought of. We weren't really that sensible. There was no strategy or nothing.
Yeah.
We never had band meetings about or went to the gym or anything like that. At least I didn't, anyway. Actually, you know what? None of the others did either, to my knowledge. So, unless they sneakily snuck out to the gym.
The last time the Mighty Lemon Drops played was 2002?
No, 2000.
2000. And where was that show?
That was a one-off thing. That was not really a big thing at all. That was basically a friend of mine had been over visiting us in the States, and he was a friend who I'd been in bands with even before Mighty Lemon Drops. And he just had the idea of, like, he said, I could put together something in Wolverhampton in around Christmas time this year, December 2000. Do you think the band would be up for it? So we just basically, it was early days of the internet even, for me at least anyway. And we just called each other up and everybody agreed to do it. So we did one show at the upstairs room of a pub in Wolverhampton, which held about 400 people. And we were like, yeah, let's see how it goes. And it actually sold out in like a couple of hours. And so we did that, and it was a laugh, and it was fun, and that was it. That's the only time that we've done anything as a band since.
Yeah. No, I remember some of your shows here in the Bay Area, San Francisco. You played at One Step Beyond in San Jose.
Yeah.
You played at the Edge.
Yeah, played One Step Beyond a few times.
Yes.
Because I think the company owned a couple of different venues. Right.
And
it would be on yeah.
Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
I super appreciate it. Anything coming up for David Newton? Anything you want to share?
Not really.
Anything related to the Mighty Angels you want to talk about?
Lemon Drops had a box set out last year on Cherry Red Records, 5 CDs, lots of little booklets and stuff. Go check that out if you're a fan and you want to. All that's from 1985 till 1990. And there is my own band, David Newton and the Mighty Angels, THE Mighty Angels, who put out an album a couple of years ago called A Gateway to a Lifetime of Disappointment. Plug. You can find that. You can stream it on the internet. Or I have a couple of physical copies left. I don't have many, but if anybody does want to, I think you can find that on. I get confused. Is it Bandcamp? I think you can buy it on there. I'm not sure. Or I think that actually Discogs might have one as well. Other than that, I have a couple of things coming up in the studio. Nothing that exciting to report about at this point. Yeah, that's it. Life goes on, really. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for all the music. It's a big part of my life and many people's lives. So,
thank you.
We greatly appreciate it. Thank you, David.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
David from the Mighty Lemon Drops.
Bye.